What's going on, everybody? We are back with another tier list. Ooh, here we go. This time we're ranking all of the legendaries from Secrets of Power. Some of these have unlocked some really cool things. Obviously, the new Win the Game card is in here. And some of them, and most of them, are varying levels of success so far in the playtesting. So we're going to rank them on the tier list as we love to do. Before we talk about the tiers and the cards and all that good stuff, I want to say a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Guys, you really do make this very, very much more possible to dedicate a lot more time to this. So it's a lot of fun to do so. But let's talk about the tiers real quick. Starting us off with the S tier. So just keep in mind that I'm rating these in relation to each other, as in I'm just ranking these in terms of set 6. If I were to include all of the legendaries, then the list would get way different, okay? But in terms of set 6, the S tier are going to be cards that actually have a chance to really make an impact on the meta. These are cards like we saw from last set, like Anakin or Darth Vader, that like completely shift archetypes or completely shift decks to make you want to play these cards because they are so powerful. A tier, these are ones that I think are going to be staple additions to a lot of decks already. Maybe you don't like move your whole deck around them, but you can index towards them slightly, or you just add them in because it just makes sense in that style of deck. B tier, these are going to be ones that if they fit in on the curve, maybe you add them. Maybe there's like one or two of. Maybe they're some really powerful sideboard cards. They do something, but it's oftentimes just kind of a, well, I guess I'll throw this in there type of card. The C tier ones, these are going to be ones where they can be hit or miss. Sometimes they can be solid, and sometimes they're just going to be a resource. They kind of give you that option. Another spot where maybe you're playing 1 to 2 of. They can still do very niche, strong things in some cases, but overall, they're cards that aren't going to make a huge impact, or they're generally just a little bit too weak to set up. And then D tier cards, I think, are cards that you just really never want to play. Either they're way too expensive, or they're win more in that they don't actually help you win the game. It's more of like a finisher in terms of you could just use something else. Types of cards like that, or maybe the setup is just way too powerful to get this rolling. Those are going to be the D tier cards. That said, let's start off with our Vigilance cards for today. Starting us off in the Vigilance category, we've got Kylo Ren's Command Shuttle, and I'll try to put up all the cards on screen as we are talking about them. So Kylo Ren's Command Shuttle, we've got a 4-cost space unit in Vigilance Villainy. It's a 3/5 first order vehicle transport, and each friendly ground unit with Sentinel gets +0/+2. Kind of an interesting Sentinel, I guess you could say, payoff. This does kind of have a awkward spot in the curve in that there are a lot of 4-cost Sentinels that you're actually wanting to play. And so Kylo Ren's Command Shuttle doesn't really benefit you in that note. So you really need a 2 or 3-cost Sentinel for this to come down, or you need some sort of leader to benefit from it. Obviously, the Kylo Ren leader does benefit from it. It's a 4-cost 3/5 space unit, which is nothing special. It's pretty weak. You really need to get value out of the Sentinel portion, and to set this up on such an awkward part of the curve, I've found to be pretty weak, just in general. To me, this is more of a C tier option. This is one of those things where if you really do build a deck around it, it can be a little bit of an obnoxious card. That said, if you play this and your opponent's already dealt with all the Sentinels, mind you, Sentinels typically have lower stat lines because you're getting that Sentinel, well, you're kind of in a really bad spot, because now your Kylo Ren's Command Shuttle is a do-nothing 3/5 space unit for 4, which is very bad. So it is one of those cards where it's very niche. If you set up the right kind of combination, you can kind of do some cool things. But overall, it is not a card that I would generally be putting in my deck. It is borderline D tier for me. Next up, we've got Darth Scion. This is a 5-cost Vigilance Villainy ground unit. It is a 5/5 with the 4 Sith tag. It's got a when played, give an experience token to this unit for each enemy unit that was defeated this phase. And when defeated, if you have 7 or more power on this guy, you can return him to your hand. Okay. What do we got going on here, my guy? What do we got going on here? Well, not a whole lot, actually. I absolutely love Darth Scion in terms of just his lore and all the things associated with, kind of the KOTOR realm. But the reality of Darth Scion is that, for one, it doesn't say any unit. If this said any unit, it still wouldn't be all that strong, but you have to actually kill enemy units for him to generate the experience token. Let's say you kill one unit, which isn't too uncommon on the 4 resource turn or the 5 resource turn. Okay, you get a 5 resource 6/6, and that's it. That's all you're getting is a 5 resource 6/6, which is not all that impressive. Like, that is a good stat line, but you're doing nothing else. Like, compare that to like Podameron, for example. Obviously, I know that's an extreme version of a legendary, but yes, 5 resource 6/6 is not that powerful. If you get it as a 5 resource 7/7, okay, good stat line. Nothing else going for it. You need to kill 2 units on that turn. Really, all that kind of just a little bit of a weaker option. Okay, to me, this is like a borderline low B, high C tier card. We'll put it in high C tier, and if the power level overall kind of drops, I might move some picks around, but this is like a low B tier, high C tier. This guy just doesn't really do anything. He just comes in and is just like I'm a big unit, and only in some cases, right? The fact that it's not any unit, if this was any unit, I would be a little bit more excited about him. Like, he could be like a solid B tier, or maybe even a low A tier, in that, let's say I'm playing, a Kira deck, right? And I deploy Kira, and I, kind of just trade off a couple of units. Maybe Kira dies, a Sentinel Mine dies, another unit of there dies, and you drop like a 8/8 or a 9/9. That's kind of a lot for your opponent to deal with. But that's only in certain matchups, right? It's not universally good. If your opponent goes next turn and goes Fell the Dragon, I mean, it's potentially better to have another card, although Darth Sion would return to your hand. So maybe it's a grinded out type of card in those controlling matches, right? Darth Sion, I could see kind of maybe getting some value there, but that's not the case. It's you have to kill your opponent's units. Obviously, I've tried the whole Super Laser Blast into, on the 13 resource turn, play Darth Sion as like a 11/11. I've gotten off like once or twice. Not actually that strong. I've really tried for these KOTOR cards, okay, guys? I'm sorry with Darth Sion. Next up, we've got a very, very interesting legendary in Cassian. This is a 2-cost ground unit in Vigilance, Heroism. It's a 2/2 fringe tag. When this unit is defending, the attacker gets -2/-0. So kind of like a Boba Fett's armor type of effect. And if an enemy card would deal damage to this unit, a card ability, I should say, you prevent 2 of that damage. So for example, Daring Raid, no damage. Open Fire, still kills it. Just as a little note. So Cassian, it's really interesting. I wish this was on attack and on defense, because you could really do some interesting things with Cassian. But this is like a purely aggressive card. It's a purely aggressive card, because if you are trying to defend yourself with this, you're attacking with a 2 resource 2/2, and that doesn't do anything, right? But if you are attacking with it, your opponent is forced to deal with it. You have to use their units to attack with it. Now 3/5 suddenly don't kill us in one attack. Suddenly, the random events and such don't really deal with it all that well. This has some potential. It has some potential in the right deck, but it's still like a low B tier for me. It hasn't been like that amazing. There are some cool things with it. For example, if you do play this in Leia, it was something I was trying out, or the Rey, and you pump this guy up as like a 3/3, he becomes infinitely more valuable. Putting upgrades on this guy can be a little bit more interesting, right? The problem is that it still dies to Fell the Dragon, Takedown, Power of the Dark Side, Merciless Contest, Rivals Fall. I mean, if your rival's falling it, that's kind of a crazy situation, but that's what I mean, is like there's so many things that deal with it. And then even turn 2, if your opponent has the initiative, they can open fire this guy and it still dies, right? So it's a hit or miss. It's like a low B tier. Honestly, most decks is just going to prefer to play another 2-drop, which is unfortunate for my friend Cassian here. Next up, we've got Vigil. This is a 7-cost Vigilance Heroism space unit. It's a 5/9. If a damage would be dealt to another friendly unit, you prevent 1 of that damage. And if damage would be dealt to this unit by another card, you deal that much damage +1. So essentially, you make it so that all your other units are a little bit more tanky, but this guy gets a lot of damage dealt to it whenever you're dealing damage to it. Okay, it has plot as well. I like the plot. Whenever a card has plot, I'm always more excited about it, because I'm like, ooh, I can get some free value in some situations. That said, it's a 7-drop. There are not a lot of 7-drop leaders. You might be thinking, oh, well, can't you just wait to deploy your leader? What did you just say? You waited to deploy your leader? Is that really working out for you? Maybe, maybe not. Obviously, Yoda is one deck that I immediately kind of thought about. It's Vigilance Heroism. It's a 7-drop leader. It's kind of more defensive. Preventing damage on your Yoda might be good. But you could also just play Luke Skywalker on that turn, guys. You could play Luke Skywalker on the 7 resource turn. To me, Vigil has zero place in the game at the current moment. This is a D tier legendary. I don't really see this being good at all. Yes, you could flip this on like the Yoda turn at the same time and save an action. Do I even care about that? Probably not, because guess what Yoda wants to do? They want to kill a unit first. And so Luke can help you do that. And again, I'm comparing it to Luke, but it's the 7 resource heroism vigilance turn. And then you also, even if it's not a Luke, even if it's just like a random 5 resource play or 6 resource play in the vigilance heroism, or maybe it's just like a fell the dragon or takedown, generally those are going to be stronger in that style of deck than playing something that's going to try to prevent damage from your own units, which is not generally how you win in that deck. You usually just outvalue them and then close out with a couple of big units. Vigil just doesn't really support that strategy in a lot of the vigilance heroism decks out there, and I don't really see it being a great addition even with plot in a lot of these decks. To me, this is a straight up D tier option. Not very impressed with Vigil. Next up, we've got Lando Calrissian. Honestly, I was pretty low on this guy when I first started looking at the cards. I'm like, Lando, 7 resource ground unit, vigilance, 6/8, has got grit, kind of cool. When you play it, you have to choose an enemy unit and another friendly non-leader unit, and if you do, you heal 6 damage from your base, and then the enemy unit captures the friendly unit. I'm like, that seems like a lot of setup, and you get a 6/8 for 7. I'm not saying that he's like amazing or anything, okay? Not saying that he's amazing, but he has gone a lot higher than I initially had thought. One of the decks that I've really been trying out has been DJ Blue, and with Lando, he becomes so much better because you can capture something. Let's say you have a 6 resource turn, okay? Well, you could play this guy with 1 resource discount. Then you can choose an enemy unit, choose that friendly unit that just captured Lando, have that unit capture the unit you just put Lando underneath. You get to heal 6. Yes, the friendly unit gets captured, but now you have a 6/8. And if you have DJ out on that turn, which you absolutely can, well, you can't do the capture thing and have DJ out, unfortunately. But let's say you do have DJ out, eventually, or you deploy DJ afterwards, you could always attack that unit that just captured your unit with Lando and then free that and then get that readied up immediately. Not saying that that's an incredibly powerful, ability or anything like that, but it is a really solid synergy in specific situations that the heal can be extremely relevant. Not only that, but you're kind of incentivized to attack those units, and then you get this massive unit that has grit and everything going for it. I mean, there are some cool things with Lando. Again, that is just one example. I don't think he's incredibly powerful or anything like that, but I think he's like a low to mid B tier option, right? One of those ones that can do some cool things, and if it kind of fits within the strategy, you can add it. But it's not like an amazing, I'm going to build around this type of card. I'm honestly surprised with how high I'm rating Lando, just because in my experience so far, Lando has pulled off some incredible comebacks. I think I've even recorded a couple of games where Lando has done some amazing things. And so even though it's still on the 7 resource term, if you're playing heroism, you can drop a Luke. If you're playing villainy, you could drop a million different cards. You probably get command with it. I mean, there are things that Lando really has to compete against, right? But it does some cool things. So it's like a low to mid B tier for me. Maybe if you want to argue high C tier, I could see it, but that's kind of where I'm seeing Lando. Nothing too crazy, but does some cool things. That moves us on over into the command territory, where we've got to talk about Director Krennic here. So the first one in our command section is a 9-drop. We have a 9-drop ground unit in command villainy. He's an 8/10 with Sentinel. And when he's attacked, you may discard a card from your deck, and if it's a unit, you get to essentially draw that card, or you get to return it to your hand. So you can kind of, it gets attacked. If I have a unit on top, I draw that card. So there is nothing wrong with this card, really. It is just overcosted and doesn't really do what you want to be doing at this stage of the game for most command villainy decks. Sentinel is relevant. Don't get me wrong. You want some sort of impact on the board immediately when you're playing big units like this, which is one of the reasons why I kind of liked Lando. This one does, by just blocking the ground arena. That said, an 8/10 is a powerful Sentinel, but there's so many ways to get around it, and it's 9 resources to deploy. Even if you're ramping, oftentimes 9 resources at that point, you can be playing so many other things that is just so much better. So much better. And that's kind of the issue with Krennic. There's nothing wrong with this card. He's not a D tier for me, but he's just competing it so much, and his payoff just isn't really quite there. To me, he's like a solid C tier. He's one of those things where you can slot in the deck. I wouldn't be mad at you if you did a 1 or 2 of. If you are up against some decks that are kind of closing out the game or trying to, and you do get a couple draw card effects, and you can draw some of the powerful units, I mean, that could be relevant. I mean, there's nothing, again, wrong with this card. It's just really expensive to get an effect that's really not exactly what you're looking for in most situations when you're playing command villainy. At that point, you're loading up your Devastators as another, next turn. You can be playing a Reinforcement Walker. I'd rather be playing Reinforcement Walker for Krennic in most cases. Darth Vader's, Maul's, 7 resource. Honestly, those ones can oftentimes be more impactful than Director Krennic. And so that's kind of the issue with Krennic. But we do have an interesting one in Queen Amidala as the next one up, a 5 resource ground unit in Command Heroism. It's a 5/3, and when you play it, you create 2 spy tokens, and if damage would be dealt to this unit, you may defeat another friendly unit that shares a trait with this unit, and if you do, you prevent that damage. So first things first, full officials don't really function in the Secrets of Power so far. So I don't really think of this card as like, oh, I'm playing an official deck. What I do think about this card is kind of like the Chancellor Palpatine type of deal, where I play this, I get 3 bodies. They kind of have to deal with those 2 spy tokens first. It has like Pseudo Sentinel those spy tokens have like Pseudo Sentinel in a way, because you don't want to be really attacking the Queen Amidala, because you're going to be hitting a 5 power unit. So you're hitting the spy tokens, which doesn't really do a whole lot, doesn't really progress your board. That's a lot of actions to take. And you're getting 3 bodies for it. I mean, in a more aggressive strategy, the Queen Amidala actually does some decent work. This is going to be our first A tier, in my opinion. Now, again, don't get me wrong. This isn't like a super, super crazy strong, okay? This is an A tier, let's go. But I do think it's a solid A tier choice. And I want to defend, I don't know if people agree or not, but I do think Queen Amidala has some really, really good things going for her. It's just a lot of bodies to create on the turn in which your opponent probably is still in the setup situation of the game. And with this Queen Amidala being able to kind of create those extra spy tokens, your opponent has a few choices. Either A, they're forced to attack the spy tokens, which kind of sucks. Or B, they just ignore it altogether and try to race you. And it's really difficult to race when you deployed a 5/3 for 5, right? 5 power is already good with just a single action attack, and then you get 2 other attacks out of it, right? So that's really, really solid in terms of Queen Amidala's effectiveness, right? But then, again, your opponent, or you rather, when you're attacking your opponent, you can actually just, attack in with Queen Amidala into other units and just sacrifice your other officials to save the Queen Amidala, like your other spies, etc. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with Queen Amidala. And I think that this has a lot of versatility and just, creating a bunch of bodies on board. If you've come in from Magic, I'm always interested in when you come down with a solid body yourself, and then you come with a couple of other, options with you. So Queen Amidala, gonna be an A tier for me. Next up, we've got Figure of Unity. Now, this one I am actually kind of interested in as well. It's a 3-cost upgrade, so the first upgrade of our list here. In Command Heroism, it's attached to a unique unit, and attached unit gains, while this unit is ready, each other friendly unit gains Overwhelm, Raid 1, and Restore 1. So first things first, and you get +2/+2. So you get a 3 resource upgrade for +2/+2, which is not good, right? So you really need to get value out of the Overwhelm, Raid 1, and Restore 1. So you need kind of like another unit on board, at least to attack with this the turn it comes down, in order to get some value out of this, right? Now remember, there's a lot of spy tokens going on, so Overwhelm has a lot more value in this set than other sets, so that's an important factor, although Overwhelm to me is the weakest part of this. The other thing to remember is you have to have the unit this is attached to readied. That's not actually that big of a deal when you think about it, because leaders are unique units and they are always readied when they come into play. So you play your leader, like let's say a Sabine Wren, you play the Figure of Unity, you play Rebel Assault. That's a 4 resource turn. That's the turn that Sabine comes down. You probably have a second unit. You probably got Raid 1 and Restore 1. You got the 2 damage in. It's not bad at all. There's some cool things you're doing with that, right? Now, with Figure of Unity, you also have some other options, but you kind of do have to go a little bit wider. Now, with cards like Queen Amidala, this card looks a lot better, right? Because suddenly your spy tokens and Queen Amidala are getting Raid 1, Restore 1, and Overwhelm, right? That can be pretty strong in a lot of cases. That said, I don't think, upgrades in general are like that crazy powerful. I'm debating as to whether to put this like high B tier or low A tier. I think I'm going to slot it into low A tier at the current moment. I just think that there's some cool things you can do with this, and the power level is there. Like if you're just slotting this in a lot of decks, like Rex, for example, is a great option to slot this in. Rex Green, this is like a secondary win con. Very, very much weaker than the Unity of Purpose, obviously, but if you do deploy Rex a turn early and then you put Unity of Purpose, suddenly all those units that you're attacking with are starting out the game and they're putting on pressure to your opponent. Or like I mentioned earlier, Sabine is a great option. There's a lot of other 5-drops like the Mon Mothma. Honestly, you're putting this your unit of Mon Mothma and you're just going to town. I mean, there's some cool things you can do. Especially one of my favorite things was Figure of Unity plus Inspiring Mentor, so you double up on upgrades all in on Mon Mothma. All your other units get the +0/+1. You're passing out Raid 1, Restore 1, and you're getting the experience token. I mean, there's a lot of things going on with that. So there's a low A tier, maybe high B tier for me. But the next up, we've got Vatoon Pala. This one is kind of interesting. We've got a 9-drop space unit in command. It's a 7/7. It says this unit costs 1 less to play for each friendly droid unit. So it's not really going to cost 9 if you're playing it in the correct deck. And then it makes it so that every friendly droid unit may be exhausted to pay costs as if it were a resource. Now, obviously, this can really do some work and refund you a lot of the cost the turn it comes down if you have droid tokens down. Let's think about this kind of just as a, I'm building a deck that's going to try to make use out of this. You've got cards like Droid Deployment. You've got things like Poggle to create a bunch of droid tokens for you, Battle Droid Escort, right? It's just friendly droid units. You don't have to necessarily play all those, but if you're really trying to take advantage of a tune, you can definitely go that direction. You could easily make this cost really like the 6 resource range. That's really not that unheard of. So you're playing this for 6 as a 7/7. And then when it comes down, if those droid units are still readied up, which isn't that unlikely either, you may get 3 to 4 resources on top of that turn that comes down. It's kind of cool. Now, remember that setup is a lot of cards that really don't do a lot for the Vatoon specifically, which is kind of awkward. Maybe you can exploit it out with like a Dooku, right? Like a Dooku build with Vatoon, get that earlier, deploy, and then follow that up like an Invisible Hand or whatever it is you're trying to do. So that can be kind of interesting. Maybe you go Invisible Hand into Vatoon and you're just playing like Vulture droids, right? Because remember, any droid units can be used. It's not just like the battle droid tokens. So this has some cool things going for it. I don't think it's particularly strong. I do think there's some interesting combinations you can go with it. It's still an expensive card. It requires a lot of actions, requires a lot of units to kind of utilize. So this one, I'm going to have to put in probably like low B tier. I don't think it's like that incredible. I don't think it's like that good. But it's a really fun Twin Suns card. Guys, I've been playing some Twin Suns with this with like a Dooku Thrawn. That's one of the fun combinations, like the set 4 Thrawn, set 3 Dooku, where you're exploiting some when defeated triggers, and then you can get like Vatoon out, get double up on defeated, and then you have the droids. Like that's pretty fun, and it does some cool things. Next up, we've got Let's Talk. This is a 9-cost event in command. If a friendly unit has left this play this phase, it costs 3 less to play, and each friendly unit captures a enemy non-leader unit in the same arena. So there's so many issues with this card in my opinion. First off, if a friendly unit left play this phase, it already got worse, which is why it costs 3 less. So let's just say this was a 6-cost event. Would I play this? Probably not. It probably still would be where I'm going to put it, which is in the D tier. So let's say you have a 6-cost event. Again, you're just assuming you get the discount. You get a 6-cost event. At any given moment, you're probably only going to have 2 to 3 units on board. Let's say you're going really hard and you're playing Rex double green and you're doing this on the 5 resource turn or 6 resource turn. You've had a token leave play this phase, and you go ahead and you've captured all their units on the ground arena. But that's it. You can't capture space units. So if you're getting raced in a space arena, that doesn't really do anything. This to me feels a little bit more of like a win more type of card. You're going to need a lot of units to capture their units, and if you're in that spot where you don't need to spend it on additional like power that turn or additional board deployment or interaction, it's not really that great. It's kind of a tempo advantage play, which is something to consider. I just don't think you should be putting this in your card. And this is again if a unit has left play this phase, so unit has to leave play this phase in order to capture units on the opposing side of the battlefield. Again, if you're in this spot where you're trying to make this massive tempo swing, it's probably not working out for you, in terms of either A, you don't have enough units on the board, so this doesn't do anything, or B, you're probably already in a spot where you're going to win super hard anyways. I'm not a huge fan of Let's Talk. I'm curious to see if people are going to actually get some effectiveness out of it. I see the value in terms of like maybe it's a big old tempo play. I'm going to put it ahead of Vigil just because of that, but I don't really see this being added to a deck and seeing it actually pay off and be like a good card. But that's going to be the commands. Let's move on to aggression. In aggression, we get to start off with one of my favorite cards in the new set, which is Dryden Voss. We've got a 4-cost ground unit in aggression villainy. It's a 2/5 underworld card, and on attack, you may double the unit's power for the attack, and if you do, it will not ready during the next regroup phase. You kind of put it in like a no good to me dead type of state. So first things first, I've tried everything under the sun with this guy. I've tried, the twice the pride double aggression, where you really pump this guy up, put a bunch of upgrades, and then attack in. If you go twice the pride plus like a fallen lightsaber, for example, that is an attack for 18. Doubling the power, it can get very quick, very disgusting very quickly. I think the best shell that I've seen for him is like a sneak attack Dryden, where you get to go like on the 5 resource turn, you sneak attack Dryden, you get to surprise strike in for 10 damage, which is pretty nice. I mean, there are some cool things you can do with him. Generally, what happens with this guy, though, if you're playing him as like a normal 4 resource play, your opponent sees Dryden, they just immediately try to kill it. Now, that can be, in some senses, like a good thing for you, but in most cases, it's not a good thing because you invested 4 resources into a play that's not really going to have you all that much combat effectiveness. I've had many times where someone just ECLs out something, gets kind of a free kill because it's not super tanky, and it has 2 power, which does not do anything on defense. You really need to get an attack with this, and it needs to be a finisher, because if you're attacking with this, or it needs to be kind of like combo piece with like Grand Inquisitor, which I have also tried, it needs to do something to finish out the game that turn, because this is what it really does. You're not going to get any effectiveness on the next turn, and that's going to be pretty weak. So to me, this is more of like a C tier card. It's not bad. It can do some really explosive things. Like I said, the sneak attack out, getting in some damage is pretty interesting, but there's nothing too crazy going on with Dryden here. Next up, we've got the new Win the Game card, the Confidence in Victory. This is a 10-cost event in aggression villainy. You can play the only as your first action in the action phase. So essentially, you get to 10 resources, you play this, and then you choose an arena at the start of the regroup phase. If you're the only player who controls unit in that arena, you win the game. This card seems horrible. I'm gonna be honest, guys. I think this is like a straight up D tier. Do I think that you can win the game with this card? I'm going to try. Do I think it's actually good to put in your deck? Absolutely not. Let's just think about kind of how this plays out. You're on the 10 resource turn. You are a little bit more of an aggressive deck, or maybe you're just kind of like a mid-range deck. You've got a couple units on board. You play this as your first action. Okay, your opponent is alerted, right? Maybe they have the first action of the game because they've got initiative and they play a unit down. Maybe you get fortunate in that way. But suddenly, your opponent has to have 0 answers to this card. What that means is they either can't play any units to the board or a couple units to avoid, or they can kill all your units. They have to have some sort of answer. If they have no answer, then it's over. But think about that. If you have multiple units in that arena and you play this card, and you can kill every single one of your opponent's units and be left with units on the board, is it better to have just hit the base at that point? Almost certainly yes. The game probably is just over by that point, instead of trying to do this confidence in victory type of gambit. Does that mean that this card is not like you cannot win with this card? No. I think there is chances that you can. I just think that those chances are the same chances as to when you can just win the game in a normal state. And that's the problem. This is definitely like 100% a win more card. And so we're going to try it out for a video, but I don't think you should be putting this in your deck. I don't see it being all that powerful. Even in the situations where you're playing against a control deck, how many times are you getting to 10 resources and your opponent can't deal with every single one of your units that you put on board, or at least deploy one of their own? That's never happening. If it is, then you're probably in a great spot already. So confidence and victory, gonna get a D tier for me. I don't think this is a card that you should be putting in your deck. Next up, we've got Chopper. Chopper is kind of an interesting one. This guy's been a lot of fun. He is a 4-cost, or 2-cost, 4/1 rather, in aggression heroism. He's got the Rebel tag, which is really, really relevant, and the Droid and Spectre tag. He has, when this unit deals combat damage to a base, each player discards a card. I think this heavily favors the more aggressive decks in most cases, because you can really utilize, kind of your cards, discard the more expensive, and just kind of make your single play in every turn. Whereas your opponents, especially the more controlling or mid-range, kind of have to have more options, especially if they're ramping, right? They're accelerating to other cards. And if you have other ways to disrupt them, like in an aggression Cunning style of list where you can attack their hand in other ways, like Ahsoka Tano or your Kira, it gets even better. Now, it is a 4/1, so it's very aggressive, but it's also very, very squishy. In certain matchups, this is like a bad card. But in some matchups, it's really, really strong. Like, really, really strong. Like, especially in the Colossus matchups, you are just going to town. If your opponent doesn't have an answer on turn 1, or turn 2, rather, you are very, very happy in that game. You can pick apart an opponent's hand so quickly. If you go like turn 1 Chopper, into turn 2 just play any unit, turn 3 play Ahsoka, they're like empty-handed if you've gotten 1 to 2 attacks in with Chopper. It is incredible. Obviously, if this was working with your leader ability like Padme, it gets even better. It's got the Rebel tag, so it works with Rebel Assault, it works with Wing Leader, Fleet Lieutenant, all that good stuff. And it attacks for a lot. It is bad against the shielded units as well. There's nothing like too crazy about this one. To me, it's like a solid, low B tier. I know I said a lot about it, but it's like a low B tier. I don't think this is a card that I'm playing more than like 2 of. And in some matchups, I'm just resource. But in some matchups, I'm like, dang, slamming that. Let's go. So Chopper, B tier for me. And then we've got Nemik's Manifesto as the final aggression card here. It's a 1-cost upgrade in aggression heroism. It's attached to a non-vehicle unit, and its attached unit gains the Rebel trait, and when it's defeated, deal 1 damage to each enemy base for each other friendly Rebel unit. And it's +1/+1. So I want to just bring your attention to how much Figure of Unity costs, and then how much Nemik's Manifestos cost, and then how much resources Sabine deploys on. I've been playing this a lot in Sabine, and I've been going like Figure of Unity, Nemik's Manifesto. And what's happened is you get +3 power on Sabine, which is very similar to Darksaber, but then you have this like very big burn effect where your opponent is kind of forced to deal with Sabine as quickly as possible. But if they do, they're getting their base hit for 2 to 3 to 4 damage if, well, they're focusing on Sabine and you're just playing a bunch of other units. It's not unlikely in Sabine to have at least 1 other unit on the board when Sabine deploys, especially if you're using that 4 resource turn to put upgrades on Sabine. So then, you get 1 extra damage in with a Figure of Unity because they're focusing on killing your other unit. Because it's on, Sabine, you get +2 damage or +3 damage from the next Manifesto and the Figure of Unity. And I mean, that's a pretty nice swing. It's also just been really good on certain other Rebel units. Like, I've just slotted this in and they're like, oh, I've got like 5 resources on this turn. I'm gonna play a K2 and then put a Nemik's Manifesto on K2. And suddenly, even if it just does 4 damage to an opponent, that's actually been really, really solid. Especially since it's a heroism card. And so it works with like for a cause. That's also another bonus for it. Nothing too crazy about Nemik's Manifesto, but I found it to be like a solid B tier. It has actually done some decent work in the more hyper aggressive strategies. Okay. It's not a card where you're like, oh, dang, this is a good upgrade. It's, oh, dang, I'm playing Rebels. I'm putting this in my deck as a value piece, right? As just a little bit to get some little bit extra burn in and kind of close out the game. Maybe get like, again, if you're getting like 2 to 3 damage out of this, I'm happy. That's like a good use of 1 resource, right? That's kind of the way I think about it. And it can oftentimes at least do 2. Oftentimes more than that, 3 to 4. Especially in like Luthen, where he comes down as a 2/7. You can put this on and Figure of Unity on Luthen as well. I've done that as well. There's so many different combinations to this. And to move on to our final category, we've got the Cunning card. So Cunning cards, there's some cool things in here. And we get to start off with one of my favorite, which is Darth Traya. So Darth Traya has finally unlocked a full infinite combo that's actually reasonable to obtain. I know in the past there was like a Sandhill Trench plus, all this random sequencing and everything. They're like a very perfect, okay, this is infinite. I suppose, but it's very difficult to pull off. Darth Treya is very, well, relatively easy to pull off. You got Grand Inquisitor, you got Tragedy of Plagueis, and you play Darth Treya. Now you're in 3 aspects, so it's a little bit expensive to play Treya, and she is a 2/5. But let's just ignore all that for a second. Outside of the infinite combo, which I don't think is like a higher than like C tier or maybe low B tier combo anyways, what is Treya actually providing? So we have a 3-cost Cunning villainy unit, is 2/5, that gets the force tag, and on attack you may ready a non-unit leader. Now when I initially read this, I was like, non-leader unit, okay, that seems pretty cool, right? But it's non-unit leader, which means it can ready your leader action again. So obviously the immediate thing I thought of is, okay, Grand Inquisitor yellow, you kind of get some free value in here, get to attack for a decent chunk, right? But honestly, that's not actually that strong. I've really enjoyed playing her in other leaders. For example, a great option is Chancellor Palpatine from set 3. You can do multiple actions of his in a single turn, which is incredible. Take, for example, you have Palpatine, you have lost your heroism unit, right? So you've turn 2, you flip Palpatine, you get to heal, you get to draw a card, okay? And then you play out whatever villainy unit you want, like a Treya, for example, right? Then turn 2, or rather turn 3, you play out another villainy unit, because you wouldn't have been able to flip back anyways. You flip Palpatine to the heroism side, you attack in with the Treya, and you get to ready it up again. If you have another heroism that dies, you get to flip it again. It's really more powerful in the later stages of the game when you get to kind of flip back and forth and you get Treya on the board and you get to like play a removal option like power the dark side, and then you flip and you've got the heroism side again, and you've got the clone trooper generator, get to deal 2 damage, and maybe you have a heroism unit that you can attack in and have that be killed or whatever it is. That's the type of kind of synergy that you can really do. There are other options for it. I think that there's nothing like too crazy going on with Treya, right? But there are some decent synergies. I think she's a solid, B tier. Solid B tier. I think if you just play her as a standard unit, you're going to be like reasonably okay with that. I've played like Kylo Ren yellow and like double discarded to her, and I had her pass out 4 power in a single turn, which is kind of fun. I've had other leaders that have been doing okay with her. It's more of just a very unique KOTOR card. Again, Treya and Sion I've played so much with because I really want these guys to be excellent, but it really has just been okay. Next up, we've got Grand Admiral Thrawn. This guy's an expensive one. We got a 7-resource Cunning villainy unit. And when you play this guy, an opponent may choose a non-leader unit they control. And if you do, this unit captures that unit. So the Thrawn captures their unit. But if they don't, you get to ready this unit. And when you defeat, or when this guy just gets defeated, a friendly unit captures an enemy non-leader unit in the same arena. So he kind of has this like when played coming in effect and a when defeated effect, which is pretty powerful. He has an 8/7 stat line, which is very, very powerful for 7 resources. I actually am a huge fan of that. And he's got some interesting things going for him. For example, if an opponent doesn't have a unit, you get a 7-resource 8/7 that's immediately readied. If an opponent does have a unit, you get to just capture this unit. And if they don't, have you capture that unit, you get an 8/7 readied up unit. So you really got some interesting dynamics here. And if they do end up killing this, then you do get some tempo advantage by capturing their unit. So you don't just play a 7-resource thing and it does nothing, right? I mean, it's going to do something. It's either going to capture a unit or immediately attack, right? Or it's going to die after you've captured their unit. And then you get to, capture their unit again. And so that's pretty strong. So I think this guy is a solid B tier. I don't think there's anything too crazy about him. I think he's on the higher end of B tier. I've had some valuable games with him. I played some decks that have just not really utilized Thrawn at all. And so he's kind of in that spot where if he kind of fits on the curve, you can do some work. There are some spots, like if you directly compare him with like Cad Bane, which is the previous 7-resource Cunning villainy capture type of card, I think there are some spots where Cad Bane is a lot better, but there are also some spots where Thrawn just dominates, right? Cad Bane's much better at like completely disrupting your entire opponent's game plan. Thrawn's better at closing out the game and putting the finishing touches on it, which I guess kind of fits their characters a little bit better. Then we've got Obi-Wan Kenobi as the next card up. This one's a 4-cost Cunning Heroism ground unit as a 4/5, and he's got the ability to, when this unit deals combat damage to a base, you discard a card from the defending player's deck. For this phase, you may play that card from the discard pile, ignoring its aspect penalties. So the idea here is, if you guys remember Ezra, to me, this is like a very, very big comparison to like Ezra. Ezra was a 3-resource 3/4, which, to be honest, a 4-resource 4/5 is a better stat line for Obi-Wan than Ezra was. But Ezra gets to look at the top card of your deck and potentially play that one, right? This one is very similar in that you get to, take the top card of a deck and play it. Now, you're taking the top card of your opponent's deck. Now, generally, I would say that's a little bit worse than at least seeing the top card of your deck. But there are some interesting synergies with this, especially with like the new leader Sabe, where you can kind of manipulate the top card of your opponent's deck and then choose the best of the two and then maybe set up for an Obi-Wan attack. It also has the force tag. And like I said, a 4/5 stat line is a lot better. This one seems like it can get a little bit of value going and do some decent things. I don't think it's like incredibly powerful or anything like that, but I do think it's one of those cards where, yeah, if I'm in the 4-resource slot range, would I consider playing this? I think it's a low A tier. I do think, however, that the 4-resource slot, it's really congested. You've got Ahsoka Tano, you've got Kira, which are two amazing 4-drop cutting heroism disruptive elements. And so I think Obi-Wan's going to kind of depend on the deck that you're slotting it into. But like I said, there's some powerful synergies, especially with like the new leader Sabe, that can really make Obi-Wan shine. Next up, we've got a Lightmaker, which is a 5-cost space unit in Cunning Heroism. It's a 3/4 Rebel capital ship. It's got Raid 4, and when you defeat it, you choose an arena, you exhaust each enemy unit in that arena. So a really nice tempo advantage play, and it's really aggressive in the space arena. This is a 5-resource, essentially 7-powered space unit. This thing is a powerful finisher. And again, if they just immediately kill it, it's a nice tempo advantage play, especially in the more aggressive matchups. I mean, just think about this. If like you play this and you're fighting up against like a Vader Yellow and you just attack into one of their units, you exhaust their entire Space Force, that can really buy you some good time. But, honestly, I mean, even if that doesn't happen at all, you do get a very, very aggressive space unit, like a very aggressive space unit, which is the Raid 4. Obviously, if you're for some reason have Marchion Row in your deck, that could be a Raid 8, which is kind of sick. If you sneak attack this out, not that that's going to get the when defeated trigger all that great or anything like that, but it is a 7-powered sneak attack space unit, which is a lot of damage. It is a Rebel unit, which is relevant. I mean, to me, if like I'm playing Sabine Yellow, this is like an immediate slot in, or like Kazuda, this is an immediate slot in. I'm kind of excited about it. This one just seems like a good, solid B tier. Again, I'm not like super excited about it or anything like that, but I do think in a lot of decks, you're just gonna be like, yeah, I kind of want that in my deck. It's a 5-resource space, it's super aggressive. I can see it doing some decent amount of work. Next up, we've got Sinara San. It's a 7-cost cunning unit, 7/7 underworld with hidden. And on attack, for each friendly unit, you ready a friendly resource. This also counts itself, which means, you're gonna probably at least get one because you've got Sinara attacking, right? And so, you're not unlikely to get 2 or 3, I would say. So you kind of get like a Boba Fett, when he's flipped type of action where you get to ready up a couple resources. It's a 7-resource 7/7 that doesn't do anything immediately, and you have to attack with it. And then you also have to have made a play before you use this. Hopefully it's another unit so you can ready up more resources. There's a lot of things you gotta do. I mean, on a 7-resource slot, it's gonna have a lot of competition. If you just think about like the other cards in, Cunning, let's say Villainy, you've got Thrawn, you've got Cad Bane. Those cards, way stronger when they come into play and way more swingy and way more powerful. Now, again, these are way higher tier than Sinara in my opinion. But then also if you compare it to, just 7-cost heroism cunning cards, this thing doesn't even come close. You've got Han Solo, Qui-Gon. These are ambushers that immediately take effect and do something immediately. That's kind of the hallmark of a really powerful leader gameplay, is you need something to happen immediately. It's one of the reasons why I like Thrawn, right? You're going to capture a unit, you're going to have a readied up unit. It seems pretty solid. It's also the reason why I do not think Sinara San is good at all. She has hidden, which I think can do some cool things, but if you're trying to like get some value out of her and make multiple plays on the 8 resource turn, you're probably just in a win more spot. You probably could have won the game already. You know, you play a unit, you attack with your unit, you ready 3 more resources, you play another unit, you probably could have just attacked with your units and then maybe played a different 7-drop to win the game that way. So Sinara San gonna be a D tier for me. And I figured I'd just slot in the Darth Nihilus with the rest of the Cunning cards because it's just a one of without any aspect of affiliation. So Darth Nihilus, we have a 7-cost ground unit in Villainy. He's a 6/6 Force Sith unit, and when played and on attack, you deal 3 damage to the unit with the least remaining HP among other units. If it's a non-vehicle unit, you get an experience token. Now, it's important to remember, and I always had trouble with this when I first started playing with Nihilus, and you guys even saw it in my earlier videos. You have to hit the lowest HP, which includes your own units. So you got to be careful about this. Now, if you're ambushing this guy out, he does some cool things, but he's also a 7 resource 6/6, but he does have a when played, right? So you do get some effectiveness out of him when he comes in. I do like that. Again, I like my lighter game plays to do something immediately, and he at least does something. Again, the ambushing part about him actually is quite strong, because if you can set it up to where you will hit one of your opponent's units, usually if you're able to ambush, that 6 damage is probably going to kill something. And that 6 damage is also going to give it 2 experience tokens in most cases. And that means that you're ambushing, killing something, and then you're have an 8/8 to kill something else, which is really, really good. That's, you know, ambush kill 2, which, you know, not a lot of 7-drops can do that. Now, there's only certain decks that can function with that. Dryden's one of them. But if you have like Timely Intervention, you can do this for 8 resources or even 9 resources. If you think about the other 7-drops that can do that with Timely, now Darth Nihilus is kind of a little bit unique in that regard. I don't think this is like an amazing card. I'm not going to put it in C tier because I do think it's got some potential, but I don't think it's got a lot of potential. I think it's going to be like a really low B tier option. But that's going to wrap up all of the legendaries from set 6. You'll notice that there's no S tier. I really don't think that there's going to be any cards in here that are going to change the meta like an Anakin or Darth Vader. Those were my S tiers of the last set, and they truly were S tiers. I mean, it wasn't really anything different. Like, there were a couple of cards in the A and B tier that did have an impact and were slotted into decks, sure. And I do think that's going to be the case for a lot of these A and B tier cards as well. But I don't think they're going to swing the game as much as some other cards that we've seen in previous sets. I don't think there's any card on this list that really gets there for me. Now, I do think there's some really strong ones. I think Queen Amidala is going to be a great addition to some, you know, more go wide aggro style of decks. Figure of Unity, I think, has a decent purpose. Obi-Wan, if you can slot it in. I even think Nemec's Manifesto, if you wanted to put this in A tier, I can kind of see it. I just think that it's so cheap and gets you some minor effectiveness here and there that it's really solid. There's going to be a lot of B tier options, things that can kind of really work well with some different decks and slot in depending on what style you're going for. If it fits the game plan, then you kind of put it in your deck. And then there are a few C and D tier, which I really don't see a whole lot of usage out of. But this is kind of the list. You know, I wanted to avoid the S tier here because I wanted to make it very clear that, like, when I'm rating the S tiers and you're comparing it to other lists when I've done the legendary tier list, those are like clear S tiers, okay? Anakin and Darth Vader, if you were to put that in this set, they would be head and shoulders above everything else on this list, and that's kind of what the point of the S tier is. Those things are going to make an impact. But I'm curious to see where this set will land. I don't think there's a ton of power in this set comparatively to the previous sets, but I do think there's a few powerful cards that can make a shift on the meta. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Did I, kind of snuff any card? I'm sure I made some people mad, which is kind of the joy of these tier lists, right? We're voicing our opinions, and the more opinions you hear, the more kind of thoughts you can kind of test and a strategy you can kind of test, and you just come up with a better game plan at the end. It's kind of why I enjoy the tier list. I love hearing everyone's emotional investment in some of the cards, including my own. When I read the comments, I'm like, dang, I kind of disagree with that, So thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know what you think. I love hearing the comments on these videos, and I'll see you all for the next one.